Hello, and thank you for joining the session. Today we're going to be working on our chatbot again. Today, hopefully we're going to be focusing mostly on sort of making our API continuation token a little better. One problem I am noticing from the last session is that it appears the initial JSON payload isn't working. So this is all of the messages that should be showing up that have started since this episode kicked off. It actually started recording a little before we start broadcasting properly. If I reload the page, you can see it's empty. So what I need to do is figure out where that went wrong. So let's check the network tab, see if we broke something else. Chat messages is currently broken. Let's see, what do we get? Admin live chat messages. Interesting. So we get a 404, which is not what I would have expected to see. Let me see if I can pull this up then. All right, so we have the new session chat messages controller. So I think this is the problem, is that the name is the same from our new controller. I hadn't renamed this to have the session chat messages prefix first. So this is a case of, I don't remember if it's the first one wins or the last one wins, but Symfony doesn't complain if you give the same name to multiple actual routes. But when it generates the URL, it can only generate one of them. So again, I don't remember if it picks the first one, the last one, or at random. But that's the problem here, is that when we generate the URL for, let's see where to go now. When we generated the URL for chat messages originally, it was going to admin live chat messages. So once we try to look at that route, Symfony doesn't detect it anymore because the only route it knows about was the session chat messages endpoint. So let me reload now and see if it works as expected. There we go. Cool. So now we're actually able to see all of the information that have been recorded for this session. Looks like Supernova's there as well on Twitch, which is awesome. So we can see here that as I reload the page, things start to work again. So I'm actually going to push that fix so that I can have that in production right away as well. So let's go to code. Rename route. Something unique. All right, that's good. So then we'll actually get that pushed to production as well. It's not really a bad thing necessarily, because it's still going to show up as new messages come in on my actual live screen, which I have running right here. Oh, actually, I need to switch back to the browser view. There we go. So I actually have Safari running the production instance. So as we keep playing around with things in our dev environment, I can actually see what's going on in production. So this bot is at a point now where I feel like it's solid enough that it is actually giving us reasonable information. So I'm going to leave that off to the side, and I'll just have it up while we're working on this. So one of the things that we did, one of the things that we started to do was more or less copy the implementation from the admin area to a public API section. So we have the part that gets the sessions, and we have the part that does the author info. We did some refactoring to put the bulk of the work of decoding an author from a source type and author ID to a response into a service. And this actually cleaned up both of the controllers pretty well. I'll go back to the live controller. It looks very similar. So the author info gets the same information, just potentially displays it differently. It also means that when we go in and start creating Astrocasts users, so that people can chat directly from the site itself, we'll just have one place that we need to start decoding Astrocast users, and we won't have to worry about doing it in multiple locations. So that's good to go. The chat messages are very similar as well. The main difference between these two is that the admin live chat messages, it doesn't care right away about what the session is. So we don't tell it what session it is. It asks the stream manager to guess which session is currently active. But from that point on, everything is the same. We get the next page token, we get the session itself, or we use the session itself to find the session chat messages for the session that is current, pass in the next page token, and we output the data. If we look at the new controller, it's going to be very similar. It looks like we have somebody, ooh. All right, so I just saw my own chat message just show up very slowly in production. I wonder, let me see here, if my bot, oh, okay. So I think the bot got restarted after deployment. We see here, yeah, it's successfully deployed. So I'm actually going to restart the production bot now that Heroku has the new version of the code. All right, so we're running that. Cool. All right, so sorry about that. Back to the chat messages. The difference here is that we are being passed the session as a part of the URL. So we aren't guessing the session anymore. The public API is only ever going to work if you ask for a session or ask for information for a specific session. Otherwise, the rest of the code is the same. So one thing that I'd like to do is try to figure out how to handle this next page token. Right now, it's pretty transparent to the client. If we look at, let's see here, live, there we go. If we look at the way that the next page token is handled, when we get the response, let's see here, seen messages, pull. We look to see if we have a next page token. If we do, we include it. So we don't actually look at next page token. So we don't know what it looks like, at least not at this point. When we get the response of live chat messages, we get the next page token. And the next page token then just gets read directly from the response data. So this is all very transparent currently to the client. The client doesn't know that what we're actually sending for the next page token is just the ID of the last message. So that's still what we're going to be sending, but we might want to sort of obfuscate that a little bit, but also maybe provide some additional information to help the server decode that information and do something meaningful with it. So that's kind of what we're going to be working on today. If we look at how YouTube is handled, we can see that it's sort of doing the same thing. We can see here that it has a next page token specified. That means that the next time we make the request for the YouTube chat messages, we're going to use that same next page token, and then it ends up generating a brand new next page token every time it goes through that cycle. So we're going to be doing something pretty similar to that right now. So I think I'm also going to try and do some testing. With all these sessions so far, I don't think I've actually done any testing for the code. So I think this might be a good time to actually try to do that. So if we look at the code that we're dealing with here, there's some pieces of information that we need to get. So I'm going to start sketching this out. So we need next page token, and it is optional. So we'll do next page token, and we need to get a session. And this is the same information that we need inside Live Controller as well. So we're going to get the session, and we can get the next page token from the URL or from the request, and it can default to null. Same thing that we're doing right here. Something that we aren't doing on this at all is any sort of limiting of the number of messages we're returning. So we're going to have to do something along those lines as well. So right now, and I don't think we're going to give the user the ability to say how many chat messages they want. So that's going to have to be in there somewhere. So we'll have server side options. We'll do number. Well, we'll do message limit. And let's say the default's going to be 5. We're going to do a small default, small default message limit, just so we can sort of see this in action. As long as we have enough of those to actually work on, it should be fine. So server-side option is going to be 5. This does mean that we might have to do something different with our repository here. So one of the things a server-side is going to have is, let's see here. We're going to need the session chat message repository so that it can actually query for information based on the next page token. It sort of depends on how we do this. It might make sense to create a service, sort of like we did with the author info decoder. We could do something like session chat message paginator or something along those lines to put all of this logic in one spot as opposed to trying to force it all into a repository method. So I think that's probably the way we're going to do that. So we're going to need the session chat message repository. Since both sections of code are going to use the same information here, I think we can probably just do that. So the structure that we send back right now is next page token. Something we might want to send back is the frequency of getting messages. We could also have potentially the option to get the whether or not it should do something again. So we can do something like has next, and this will be a Boolean. So we can know whether or not we should ask for more messages right away or if we should start the polling process. Likewise, when the polling comes up, if there are, say, 11 messages in the queue, it should be able to get all 3 of those really quickly until has next returns false, at which point we can start going back to the long polling. So let's do that as well. Next page token, the session that it's looking for, it's going to be in the URL. Let's see here. All right. Has next limit +1. All right. So the other thing that we'll have to figure out is probably the ordering, because right now everything, when we go to one of these endpoints, it's pretty simplistic the way it works. If we go to chat messages, it starts from the top down. I don't know if that's actually the way that we would want to do this. Mostly because if we limit to the first 5, is it going to grow up or down? I guess is the thing. So I think we'll have to play with that a little bit. It looks like the newer messages currently are at the bottom. So if we just do a normal limit, I think that might actually work. The problem is that the IDs are growing. So I just need to make sure that the math there works out right. Also need to make sure that this bot is still collecting information correctly. Actually, are these in the right order? Okay, so it's just my display had things backwards, I guess. I think it was a pooling thing. Okay, anyway, so let's go ahead and create a service. So what we did before for the author info, we had that under chat. So let's do the same thing here, and let's do, let's call it the session continuation manager. I hate that manager suffix just because it seems like it could be a little more creative than that. But let's do it's actually the message continuation manager. All right, and it made it as a trait. Awesome. Okay, so based on the notes that we had earlier, the things that we need are the session chat message repository. So session chat message repository. There we go. And then that might be all we need at this point, but let's just start with that and see if we can get pretty far just doing that. And then we'll do find chat message, find messages. And we said we'd have the session, and we would have a continuation token. We'll do continuation token equals null. And I did say we were going to do some testing, so before we get too far, let's see what we can do here. So I don't know if I have testing. I don't think I do, so I'm going to add that. It's going to bring in some PHP or some Symfony helpers as well. It's not a valid alias, really. Could swear that was actually a valid alias. All right. I haven't really gotten familiar enough with the naming conventions on Symfony.sh. I'm not even sure if they have conventions necessarily. All right, so in theory now we have PHP unit, so let's do okay, so now it's installing PHP unit. Okay, so it's installed, which is the good thing. Let me double check my dashboard, see if we got the right tags. Cool. Now that I have a better understanding of how these tags work, it makes sense why sometimes they're gone and not. I think I saw somewhere that it said they cycle out if you haven't broadcasted within 72 hours. So that would make sense why at least most of this week we haven't had to worry about those going away just yet, which is good. All right, so we have PHP unit. Let's go to tests. So top level test directory. All right, let's do this is going to be difficult to do. I think I'm going to create a test on continuation token, and I think that's actually going to be a full instance. So let's do that. Let's do source namespace. All right. All right, so we have a continuation token. And let's go here to the tests, do directory continuation, and then okay. Decodes empty string. Let's see if this actually works. Hello, Zulfor. I'm working on building some pagination into my live chat, so I can see chat messages coming from Discord, and I can also see them coming in from Twitch. So it looks like I can see you on here. It looks like you're talking to someone named Kappa, who hasn't actually said anything yet. So I'm guessing they might be in chat but not actually writing anything. So this chatbot is actually getting okay. I see. Cool. So the chatbot itself is currently getting information from Discord, and Kappa is a Twitch emote. I see. Interesting. I'll need to figure out how to decode those, I think. Let's see if that's something that Twitch emotes. Let's see here. There we go. Global badges, channel badges. Okay, so Supernova is saying that I don't think you can. For emotes, the get all emotes is one option. Looks like there might be some stuff. All right, so Supernova is saying that this information is, oh, I can see that there's a, that's interesting. Looks like there's a bug in the display code that I had not seen before, even though I've actually done that. So if I type stuff in here, okay, well, that's good to know. The emote is written in plain text. It's just the client who chooses to display an emote instead of the text. I see. So I could probably play with that. Maybe a good series about all of them and so yeah, it's possible I can do that. Anyway, so I hadn't realized that, but I do know that I'm essentially just taking the raw data coming in from Discord, Twitch, and YouTube and just throwing it in. So there's probably all sorts of security things I needed to take a look at before I open this up to everybody. But in the meantime, the thing that I'm working on is trying to do something similar to what YouTube is doing. YouTube is doing, your scrolly thing is broken, awesome. YouTube does a next page token. So I'm going to do the same sort of thing for my pagination token as well. Because right now the pagination token is just the next ID, or the highest ID that has been sent. So let's see if we get a test. I don't see that that's actually running any test. I wonder if I have to do it the other way. No. Give me your best pitch for a web app that I can code this weekend. to-do list. Seems to be the big thing these days. Let's see here. How do I annotate tests? I thought this was easier. So it's might be interesting to note that the scrolly thing doesn't appear to be broken on Safari for some reason. So yay for standards, right? Let me reload this page. Yeah, it looks like it might be a broken thing on just on Chrome. All right, so yay WebKit, exactly. So I could swear after class test. I thought that's all I needed to do. Unless I also need to do more work. Test source. Supernova, do you know what I'm missing here? Oh, it's not. Test case, that's it. I wonder if there's Symfony test helpers I need to be using. I'm just going to use the standard one for now, and we'll see if that gets me in trouble. All right, so looks like it did not perform any assertions, so it's risky. I'll accept that. That's fine. All right, so there's a couple of things I want to do. I want to decode an empty string. Let's do it decodes null. Let's see here. Should decode a valid string. Let's do it decodes number, because we already have those in the wild, so I just want to see if we can upcast things. Decodes number, and then it decodes v1. What are your languages of preference, Zulfor? You a PHP person, JavaScript, Go, Ruby? Let's see here. All right, so let's just double check, make sure everything works fine. Okay, so there's 5 risky tests, which is awesome. So I think the way that I want to do this is to have the continuation token be treated as a value object that doesn't change. So let's do private $ID, and let's do decode. Let's be super flexible with what we actually allow in. JavaScript all the way. Want to make something that's fun to show off, that's more impressive than a to-do list. I'll think on that. If there's something more interesting than a to-do list, like there's all sorts of cool game stuff you could probably do. I'm not sure if you've looked into that. I think there's a bunch of JavaScript graphics libraries and things. You can build games. Those are usually pretty flashy if you're looking to impress people. But if you're trying to build a web service or something along those lines, those can be really cool, but not nearly as impressive, depending on who you're trying to impress, I guess. All right, so if let's see here, let's do private ID. This is going to be a number. So what was the first one? We wanted to decode an empty string. So if input, well, actually let's do is null first. If is null, input, and we need to figure out what we actually want to do. Static, we could do this at this point, and it would actually give us a value back, which would sort of work. It would be empty, but it would solve the, or it would actually pass the test. So let's try that. All right, so it didn't crash, which is good. Let's do continuation token test. Let's go back to it decodes null. So we're going to do input equals null. Our continuation token decode input assert class assert instance of string. So we're going to do continuation token class continuation token. So we're going to make sure, first of all, that it decodes a null value. All right, so now we have one passing test, and there's still 4 risky tests. So we can handle that. Let's go to continuation token again. Let's do if input was empty string, turn new static. And if we run the tests again, we should have, it's not going to change anything, but it doesn't break, because we need to do a similar thing here. All right. So we should be able to do the same thing for an invalid string. So I'm just going to use foobar as the name. Let's do so we're going to set up the code. And if we do this, it actually should fail. All right, because it didn't actually return an instance of continuation token. I think I'm going to let that test fail for now. Let's do decode a number. So let's say decodes number as int. And then let's do number as string. These are both going to be different. Okay, so nothing failed, or nothing crashed. So here we want continuation token to behave differently. So if input is numeric, let's do a constructor, but let's have the value be null by default. So this will allow us to have null values passed in. So far as talking about maybe creating a card game like Hearthstone. Not sure how difficult it is to use the WebGL stuff. Yeah, I was thinking about doing the GitHub Game Jam, and I had been looking around at some of those. some of the JavaScript frameworks that they talked about. Phaser. Would you make a card game with HTML elements or canvas? Probably elements, just because I'm an old school DOM person. I never really did a whole lot with canvas. But this particular framework, phaser.io, let me see if I can post that into Restream. Yeah, we're going to deny that. Phaser.io is the package that I'd been looking at wanting to use back when I was trying to think about getting into the GitHub Game Jam. And it has a bunch of cool demos, things that you can look at that make it seem like it could actually be doable to do games like that. Let's see. So I would think it's probably still just doing arcade physics. Now I want to see some actual examples. Angle between. Maybe. Here, I think I actually played. Looks like there's some actual games you can play with. So I was taking a look at how easy it was to build a simple game like this. The actual amount of code for it is pretty small. It's only like 320 lines of code. Seems like this could be really fun to get into. So this is something something I wanted to do, but I didn't actually get that far with it. It has a bunch of stuff in place to sort of keep track of where stuff is. You can still do like collision detection and stuff with that. The problem with games is you need art assets. Yeah, that's true. I mean, I don't know where the person got this art, if they did it themselves or worked with someone else. If you wanted to do something like this and just use, go to Noun Project and create stuff out of Noun Project icons. I mean, you could really do a lot of stuff to get your concept working, and then worry about getting better graphics at another point. But actual interactivity, real-time stuff like this could be a lot of fun. The other thing is if you could interact with other people, it could be pretty cool too. Like I think Snake.io was always one of my favorites, thinking about building this type of massive multiplayer games. It looks like that's not actually coming up very well right now for some reason. But if you're using some sort of messaging system, I've been using pusher.com quite a bit for stuff that I'm building for Astrocasts. So all of the chat messages are coming in over Pusher, for example. Okay, so I just mentioned Pixie.js, which is just the rendering part. That's pretty cool. Yeah, I mean, anything like that seems like it could be a lot of fun. I mean, people look at this and anybody can see that there's something interesting going on the screen. If you're building something like Astrocasts, it's not necessarily going to be super exciting for people, unfortunately. It's like, yay, you can go to a homepage and see things and go watch stuff live or look at a list of upcoming stuff. That's not super enticing. So I guess it depends on why you want to try to impress other people. Sure, yeah, if you want to share a link to something that you created. Meanwhile, I'm going to continue on this. So is numeric. This is where we can actually start potentially testing some things. So if I go to continuation token, one more test should work. All right, null is an instance. Okay, so something, which one is that? It decodes invalid string. Okay, so that one was the one that failed before. Otherwise, we have a success, which is cool. Let's see here. pull up this link. It was all shared. It actually looks really cool. Little rubber ducky there. It's pretty neat. Cool. Sort of reminds me of the Where's My Water game. I like that one quite a bit. Oh, you can click it? Oh! Alright, that's pretty sweet. Very cool. Awesome. Yeah, that's something that I haven't done a whole lot with any sort of like graphics and physics things, but this could be, seems like this could be a lot of fun, especially if there's tools that let you do that. Okay, so let's see here. Now that we actually have something actually doing stuff, which I think is this one here, we're asserting that it's an instance. We can actually check now to make sure that it has the right data. So let's add a getter. And what we should be able to do now is for this one, and actually for both of them, we should be able to assert equals, let's do 5, and then continuation token get ID. Let's try that down here as well. I don't think asstring will work, although the whole isNumeric thing might be doing some magic for us. For some reason, nobody gets the idea to click. Yeah, that's kind of the problem with those sorts of things. Let's see, did I close that tab? I don't know why I would have closed the tab. Let me open that back up again. That's one of the things that happens is there's no affordance to make you think that you can click on it. I have that problem on one of my old websites that it looks like it could just be this as the screen. So I added this little thing here to make people think they could scroll up, but people don't necessarily always get that hint. And I've seen some people that will do like this will like bounce or something to give people an idea that there's something else there. But yeah, that is definitely one of the problems that you have if people don't know that you can click it. One thing that might be interesting would be as you move the mouse, have the mouse do some sort of trigger. Not maybe as much as it is doing right now. That maybe once it settles down as you move the mouse, it gets it enough that people would start to notice that it's moving more as you move the mouse. So even if they move it up here to go back, it could bounce more or something like that. That might get them the idea then that they can click it. Wow, that's actually really cool. Thanks for sharing that. That's awesome. All right, so let's run our tests. Failed null as an instance. Okay, so this means that we were able to decode things both as a string for input and input here. Let's do this as a string and see if this causes them to fail, because I want to make sure that assert equals is, I'm not sure if that's doing a type safe check. It's not. All right. I guess it doesn't really matter to me because this is supposed to return an int. So I guess that's okay. This also means that it would be good to make sure that there isn't something wonky going on. And so let's go ahead and double check. All right, now we're actually failing. Anytime you see a good test, it is a good idea to make sure that it's not just always going to pass regardless of what you do. So failed asserting that null is an instance of class. So that's invalid string. So we haven't quite gotten to the point where we can do something with that yet. And then it decodes v1 is going to be, this one's going to be a bit tricky. Because what we're going to do now is figure out how we're actually going to encode our input. Equals some string that's encoded. And then when we get the value back out, it's going to have ID 5. And this is going to come back with a failure because we're getting a null value at this point. So let's go into continuation token again. Let's see here. So we're decoding things. Let's do some private methods now. Let's do private is v5 or v1 input. So we can assume input is valid now, or is an actual string. But let's not worry about that. Let's say if input return false, or return, yeah, false. PHP syntax looks like a nightmare. Yeah, I suppose if you're used to JavaScript, this probably is not the prettiest. I'm not even going to try and defend that. It is not as bad as it used to be, but it is definitely, it's nowhere near as terse as JavaScript is. Well, JavaScript can look pretty gnarly too, at least in my opinion, but I love some of the newer changes in JavaScript that makes things a lot nicer. But even in JavaScript, I would do things like I wouldn't, for example, just assume I could do this. Like I usually use parentheses everywhere. I overuse them. I use the curly braces a lot, that sort of thing. All right, so what I think I'm going to be doing here is let me look up something real quick. So continuation token, some of the work that I've seen done on this. Query timeouts. So I don't want to consume them, I want to use them. And so this was one person's implementation where they were using timeset, offset, checksum. And then I think later they went to just timestamp ID. So I think I might do that instead. So what that's going to look like then, let's see if they had an implementation. Here we go. All right. Only a caveman would write an if statement without parentheses. Have you ever worked with a serverless model? You know, I haven't actually done a lot with the serverless stuff. I've seen a couple of people doing some interesting things with like Lambda and whatnot, but I myself haven't actually done that yet. Let's see here how they're building this token has next. So this is sort of what their continuation token looks like, which is good because it's close to what we're thinking about doing. Token model. It doesn't show how they're actually. I don't know enough about. It's like this is Kotlin. I don't know anything about Kotlin that would make it readable to me. Functions. All right, well, you know what? I'm just going to do what I want for this. So the way that I'm going to build the v1 format, I think I'm going to do one. Let's do ID and timestamp. And then let's do, I'm thinking about doing, I think, see if we can do base 64 on that. Let's see what that looks like. So let's do, let's do some fun stuff with some web-based base64 encoding. So let's do, say, 1. Let's do, and then let's do time. This is probably the worst possible usage of this ever, but you know what? It's a resource and I'm going to use it. That's not even going to do anything interesting. There we go. Sweet. All right, so let's use that. Let's go back to here. And then encode. All right. Let's base64 decode input. Silence errors. Good. Actually, I think I want to do this in all cases. This might actually be better because all of them are going to be base64 encoded. If not decoded, turn new static. So this is actually going to be the case that's currently failing. Do this first. Then afterwards we can do the checks to see if it's a V1 or not. Let's try again. All right, null is an instance of, okay. All right, so apparently that actually decoded. Oh, that's not good. Let's see. I want to find out how to return false if the input contains characters. Huh. This might not be nearly as safe as I was hoping it would be. Let's see what happens here. If see, how are we going to do it? ID is the second part. Otherwise, Okay, so there was an error. Return value of get ID must be of type integer, null returned. All right, so let's see where that was coming from. That is 83. So this should actually have been null. So let's use the value that we encoded. Where was that? So 523. So let's use this as the input and make sure that 523 is the value we get back out. If it works, then awesome. Cool, so we know now that we can get the ID from our base64 encoded ID. The time on it, we haven't done anything with. I don't know if we actually need the time. The main reason that we're using the time is to ensure that we have a different continuation token every time we generate one. So that's the other part that we need to do. So let's do it encodes v1, and let's give it input. Continuation token encode v1, and we'll give it an ID. Let's do ID of 15. Timestamp equals micro time. And then we're going to assert equals. Actually, we're not going to use micro time here. Let's actually just use the values that we had up here. So there we go. So if we have an ID of 523, and we have the timestamp, what we should expect to get back is this value. Oh, the wrong thing. From encoded. Okay, let's see here. Oh, I didn't mark it as a test. There we go. All right, so call to undefined method. So let's go ahead and encode, create this method. And we're almost out of time. ID, timestamp. Base 64 encode. We'll do 1 ID timestamp. Implode. Oh, all right. There we go. All right, cool. So we're able to generate that value. Let's see if we can. Let's see if we can remove the trailing equal signs. Actually, let's do that on the way in. Okay, cool. So that should work. So what we can do is have it remove any our trim. See if that works. Actually, if we run it now, it should fail. And if we remove it, it should succeed. Cool. All right. So I think this is probably pretty good. So we can use this to sort of obfuscate the underlying meaning of this token. It also means that we can change this if we want to have additional information in there later. For example, we have session ID encoded in there. If we also want to have some other value encoded in the future, we could do that in V2 or something along those lines. So I think this is probably as far as we're going to get on creating our continuation tokens today. Tomorrow we will work on actually consuming them. So we created, let's see here, the message continuation manager. We'll actually use this value or this new value object that we've created for the continuation token to actually do stuff. So outside in the controllers, we'll be able to do find messages, pass in the continuation token, and that's always going to have a value. Yeah, so we'll be able to do that, and then in both places, things should just work. So thanks for joining, and looking forward to seeing you tomorrow. Thanks. Bye.